The parking garage was dimly lit and deserted. The air hung heavy with the smell of exhaust fumes and concrete. Dr. Eleanor Vance, her arms laden with files and her mind preoccupied with the day's research, fumbled for her car keys. She was eager to get home, to escape the oppressive silence of the garage. As she reached her car, a dark figure stumbled out from behind a pillar, startling her. The man was tall and lean, his face obscured by shadows. His breathing was ragged, his chest heaving with exertion. As he moved closer, Eleanor saw the bloodstains blossoming on his shirt, the glint of metal in his hand. Fear, cold and sharp, shot through her. This was no ordinary encounter. This man was dangerous.
Don't move, I need your help.
He pressed his back against her car, as if trying to blend into the metal. His hand trembled, the gun wavering in his grip. Eleanor froze, her heart pounding against her ribs. Eleanor's mind raced, desperately searching for an escape, a way to reason with the armed stranger. His eyes, wide with fear and pain, darted around the garage, searching for pursuers, for salvation, perhaps for death itself. He was clearly injured, his face pale and slick with sweat. The stench of blood filled the air, a grim testament to his desperation.
Please, I'm hurt. I need a doctor.
He leaned heavily against the car, his body swaying precariously. Eleanor knew she had to act quickly. He was losing blood, fading fast. But could she trust him? Was this a desperate plea or a calculated trap?
I'm a scientist, not a doctor. But I might be able to help you. I have something experimental.
She kept her hands raised, her movements slow and deliberate. She needed to buy time, to assess the situation, to find a way out of this nightmare. The man's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering across his face.
What is it, some kind of drug?
He asked, his voice a strained whisper. He clutched his side, his breath hitching with pain. Eleanor knew she had a limited window of opportunity. She had to gain his trust, to convince him to let his guard down.
Nanobots, microscopic machines that can repair tissue, even reverse damage.
She reached into her bag, her fingers brushing against the cold metal of the injection gun. This was her life's work, a technology with the potential to heal, to revolutionize medicine. But could it save a life? Her life? In this desperate situation?
Nanobots?
The man echoed, skepticism tinging his voice. He looked at her, his eyes searching hers for any hint of deception. Eleanor took a deep breath, meeting his gaze with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. This was a gamble, a desperate throw of the dice. But in that moment, it was the only option she had.
It's your only chance. This could heal you, make you whole again.
She held out the injection gun, the metal gleaming under the dim lights of the parking garage. The man hesitated, his eyes flickering between the gun and her face. He was losing blood, his life draining away with each passing second. He had nothing left to lose. With a grunt of pain, the man pressed the gun against his arm and depressed the trigger. The nanobots, a swirling cloud of microscopic machines, surged into his bloodstream. He stumbled back, clutching at his chest, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. A strange buzzing sensation spread through his body, a tingling warmth that seemed to reach down to his very bones. His features seemed to blur, his face growing younger, softer. The hard lines of his jaw softened, his eyes widening with a childlike wonder. His hair, greasy and unkempt, regained its luster, becoming a rich, vibrant brown. The transformation was both fascinating and terrifying to behold. The man looked down at his hands, his brow furrowed in confusion. They were smaller now, chubbier, the callous skin replaced by the smooth flesh of youth. He stumbled back, bumping into a parked car, his balance unsteady. He opened his mouth to speak, but the only sound that emerged was a confused whimper. He collapsed onto the concrete floor, his eyes fluttering closed. When he opened them again, he was met with the sight of a brightly painted ceiling adorned with glow-in-the-dark stars and planets. He sat up, his head spinning, and found himself in a child-sized bed, covered in a colourful quilt. Panic surged through him as he realized he was trapped, a prisoner in a child's bedroom.
Where am I?
He cried out, his voice high-pitched and unfamiliar. He scrambled out of bed, his bare feet padding softly against the plush carpet.
His head swam with dizziness and the room seemed to tilt on its axis. He was naked. Why was he naked? Panic began to claw at his throat. He remembered the heist, the sirens, the desperate sprint through the back alleys. This childish room, this nauseating innocence, it was all wrong. He tried to stand, his legs wobbling like a newborn giraffe. He stumbled towards a mirror hanging on the back of the door, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The reflection that stared back at him stopped his heart cold. It was him, yes, but younger, much younger.
He raced to the door, his small hands struggling with the doorknob. It was locked. He was trapped. He saw her then, the woman from the parking garage. She stood in the doorway, a cool smile playing on her lips. She was holding a glass of milk and a plate of cookies.
Hungry? She asked, her voice sickeningly sweet.
He backed away, fear gripping his small frame. He wanted to scream, to attack her, but his body wouldn't obey. He was trapped, a prisoner in his own de-aged body.
She chuckled softly, her eyes cold and calculating. Don't worry, you're safe now. No one can hurt you here.
Safe? He was anything but safe. She had taken everything from him, his life, his identity, his very voice. He was at her mercy, a plaything for her twisted game.
His heart pounding, and found himself staring into the cold, calculating eyes of the woman from the garage. "Where am I?" he stammered, his voice high and childlike. He tried to sound menacing, but it came out as a petulant whine.
She smiled, a terrifyingly sweet smile that didn't reach her eyes. You're safe now, she purred, stroking his hair. This is your new home.
He recoiled from her touch, rage boiling up inside him. He launched himself at her, his small fists pounding against her legs. But his strength was gone, his punches nothing more than a child's tantrum.
She carried him back to the bed, her grip like iron. Don't even think about trying that again, she hissed, her voice low and menacing.
He stared up at her, fear warring with defiance in his eyes. "You'll never get away with this," he spat, his words slurred and babyish.
She laughed, a cold, humorless sound. Oh, but I already have, she said, her eyes gleaming with triumph.
The woman scooped him up into her arms, holding him tight. He struggled against her grip, his voice a choked sob. "No, Mama! No, Mama!"
He tried to stand, to lash out, but his body felt weak, uncoordinated. He stumbled, falling back onto the floor. He looked down and noticed a faint blue glow emanating from beneath his skin. The woman followed his gaze, her smile returning, colder and crueler than before.
Don't even think about it, she said, her voice dangerously low. The nanobots are programmed to keep you from harming yourself or others. You're perfectly safe. Now be a good boy.
And trust me, darling, this is just the beginning. You have a very, very long second childhood ahead of you.
He trembled, realizing the true extent of his predicament. His punishment would not be a swift death, but a living hell. He was trapped, his body a prison, his mind shrinking with every passing moment, and the woman, his tormentor, would be there, watching his every helpless, childish step.